Before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone being bullied and wish you had the courage to speak up? Have you ever been underestimated because of something that made you look different or vulnerable? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that heroes come in all forms, hit that subscribe button, because everyone deserves to have their story told, and everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are, not just what they appear to be. Rebecca Thompson, 29 years old, sat perfectly still by the large window of Danny's Diner, watching the evening traffic flow past on the highway. Her auburn hair fell in gentle waves past her shoulders, and her steel blue eyes held a calmness that seemed unbreakable. She wore a simple black sweater and dark slacks. Her lean, athletic build still evident despite the custom titanium wheelchair that had been her companion for the past 4 years. The sleek silver and carbon fiber of her racing chair gleamed under the restaurant's warm lighting. But it was the small, weathered tattoo barely visible on her right wrist that told her real story. A pair of wings with the call sign Eagle etched beneath them in bold script. Rebecca had chosen this particular seat for a reason. It offered clear sight lines to all entrances, positioned her back against a solid wall, and provided quick access to both the service exit and the main door. Old habits died hard, especially when those habits had kept you alive in the deadliest airspace over hostile territory. The diner buzzed with its usual evening crowd, families finishing dinner, truckers grabbing coffee, college students from the nearby university scattered across various booths. 5 of those students occupied the large corner booth, their voices growing louder with each passing minute. They were the kind of young men who had never faced real adversity, whose biggest challenge was a midterm exam or convincing their parents to increase their allowance. Brad Wilson sat at the center, a thick-necked economics major whose father owned 3 car dealerships across the state. His companions Mike Chun, Tyler Davis, Jake Morrison, and Alex Rodriguez formed his usual entourage of sycophants. Brad's voice carried across the diner as he gestured wildly, telling some exaggerated story about his weekend exploits. His eyes swept the room, searching for attention, validation, anything to feed his oversized ego. That's when his gaze landed on Rebecca. He nudged Mike with his elbow, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. "Check out the girl in the wheelchair," he said, his voice deliberately loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "But she's here alone because nobody wants to deal with that baggage." The other students turned to look, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to amused. Tyler snickered, always eager to please his alpha. Jake shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Alex looked down at his phone, pretending not to hear. Rebecca continued reading her book, a biography of Chuck Yeager that she'd picked up at the airport. She'd learned long ago that acknowledging bullies often escalated situations unnecessarily. Her military training had taught her to assess threats, and these boys posed none. The harassment escalated as Brad grew bolder, emboldened by his friend's nervous laughter. He began making exaggerated gestures, mimicking someone in a wheelchair with cruel precision. "Look, guys, I'm so independent," he mocked, rolling his shoulders and pretending to push invisible wheels. Tyler joined in, adding his own tasteless commentary about how pathetic it must be to need help with everything. The other diners began to notice, conversations dying as people turned to witness the spectacle. An elderly couple at the next table looked horrified, the woman whispering urgently to her husband about doing something. A family with young children quickly asked for their check, the parents shielding their kids from the ugly scene. Rebecca felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced during her first combat mission over enemy territory. Her hands remained steady on her book, but memories began surfacing unbidden. The screaming engines of her F-16 Falcon, the split-second decisions that meant life or death, the brotherhood of pilots who trusted each other with everything. Brad stood up from his booth, his friends watching with a mixture of anticipation and unease. He approached Rebecca's table with the swagger of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. "Hey there," he said, leaning against her table uninvited. You know, I've always wondered what it's like to roll around everywhere. Must be nice having an excuse to never stand up for anything. Rebecca finally looked up from her book, her steel blue eyes meeting his with a calmness that should have warned him. She said nothing, which only encouraged his cruelty. Brad reached out and grabbed the handles of her wheelchair, giving it a slight shake. The movement was sudden and jarring, causing Rebecca to grip her book tighter. The impact jarred something loose from beneath Rebecca's chair, a small magnetic case that she kept attached to the frame for emergencies. It broke open as it hit the floor, spilling its contents across the diner tiles. Military ribbons and medals scattered like confetti across the floor, air medals, distinguished flying crosses, purple hearts, and others. The diner fell silent as every person in the restaurant drew a sharp breath. Military ribbons and medals that most civilians wouldn't recognize, but that told a story of incredible valor in the deadliest skies on Earth. And among them, something that made every person in the restaurant stare in shock. A folded American flag, the kind given to families at military funerals. But this flag was different. It was signed by generals, by members of Congress, by the Secretary of the Air Force himself. But it was the small placard that had fallen with the flag that made the elderly veteran at table 12 reach for his phone with trembling hands. The placard read Captain Rebecca Thompson, United States Air Force, F-16 Fighting Falcon pilot, Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan Theater. Brad's face went white as he stared at the scattered decorations. His friends had gone completely silent, the weight of their mistake beginning to dawn on them. Tyler's nervous laughter died in his throat. The entire diner had become a tomb of silence. Staff Sergeant Williams, the elderly veteran at table 12, stood up slowly, his hands shaking as he dialed his phone. He had recognized the decorations immediately, had served alongside men and women who earned similar honors. His voice was urgent as he spoke into his phone. "This is Staff Sergeant Williams, retired. I need you to contact Colonel Martinez at Peterson Air Force Base immediately. Tell him we have Captain Rebecca Thompson here at Danny's Diner on Highway 285. Yes, the Rebecca Thompson, the Eagle. She's being harassed by civilians who don't know who they're dealing with." The tension in the diner was thick enough to cut with a knife. Brad and his friends sat frozen, beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Other diners watched in fascination and growing respect as they began to piece together what was happening. Rebecca remained calm, carefully gathering her scattered medals with the same precision she had once used in the cockpit of her F-16. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, betraying none of the emotions swirling beneath. 20 minutes later, the rumble of multiple vehicles filled the parking lot outside Danny's Diner. Through the large windows, everyone could see a convoy of black SUVs pulling up with military precision. Car doors opened simultaneously, and 35 Air Force personnel stepped out, their uniforms crisp despite the late hour. They moved with the coordinated efficiency of people who didn't mess around. Colonel Martinez led the formation, his silver eagles gleaming on his uniform collar. Behind him came his command staff, all bearing the unmistakable bearing of career military officers who had seen combat. The diner's other customers pressed themselves against the windows, watching in amazement as the small army formed up outside. Staff Sergeant Williams, still on the phone, caught the eye of Colonel Martinez and pointed toward Rebecca's table. Inside, Brad's bravado had completely evaporated. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched the soldiers take positions around the building. The front door opened with authority, and Colonel Martinez walked in. Colonel Martinez was a man in his late 40s with silver threading through his black hair and the kind of presence that commanded instant attention. Behind him came his command staff, filling the diner with an authority that made everyone sit straighter. He walked directly to Rebecca's table, came to attention, and rendered a perfect salute. "Captain Thompson," he said, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant. The colonel's eyes swept over the scattered medals, then fixed on Brad and his friends with the kind of stare that could melt steel. "You five," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "have just made the mistake of your lives." This woman is Captain Rebecca Thompson, call sign Eagle. She flew 73 combat missions over Afghanistan, shot down 2 enemy aircraft, and saved the lives of countless American soldiers, providing close air support in the deadliest conditions imaginable. The colonel's voice grew harder with each word. She lost her legs when her F-16 was hit by enemy fire during a rescue mission. She lost her future as a pilot, everything she had worked for since she was 12 years old and saw the Thunderbird perform at an air show. The colonel's voice grew harder. She could have taken a medical retirement, collected her pension, lived comfortably off her disability benefits. Instead, she chose to live quietly without fanfare, without demanding the recognition she deserves. She volunteers at the VA hospital, counseling other wounded veterans, giving them hope when they think their lives are over. Rebecca's cheeks flushed. She had never wanted her story told like this, never wanted to be held up as an example. But the colonel wasn't finished. So when U-5 decided to make fun of her wheelchair, to mock the medals she earned with blood, you weren't just bullying a disabled woman. You were attacking everything that makes this country worth defending. The silence in the restaurant was complete. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working, gathering at the service window to listen. Brad, his face now completely drained of color, looked like he might be sick. Tyler sat with tears streaming down his face, the full weight of their cruelty finally hitting him. Jake had gone completely pale, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. Mike couldn't meet anyone's eyes, his usual confidence shattered. Alex looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. The entire diner watched as these 5 young men faced the consequences of their actions, their public humiliation complete. Other customers began whispering among themselves, some shaking their heads in disgust at what they had witnessed. The family with young children had returned, the parents wanting their kids to see what real heroism looked like. But it was Rebecca who broke the silence, her voice calm and measured. "Colonel," she said, "these young men made a mistake, but they're still learning. Everyone deserves a chance to grow from their errors." Her grace in the face of such cruelty only made the students' shame more profound. Brad finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Ma'am, we're so sorry. We had no idea. We had no idea who you are, what you've done for our country." Rebecca looked at each of them, her steel blue eyes showing both strength and compassion. "You didn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic human decency," she said quietly. "That's something every person deserves, regardless of their circumstances." The lesson hit harder than any punishment could have. Colonel Martinez and his personnel began filing out, but not before each one stopped to shake Rebecca's hand or offer a quiet word of respect. The diner slowly returned to normal, though the atmosphere had been permanently changed by what everyone had witnessed. Brad and his friends left quietly, their entire worldview shifted by the encounter. In the weeks that followed, all 5 would volunteer at the local VA hospital, working alongside Rebecca to help other veterans. The elderly couple at the next table approached Rebecca before leaving, thanking her for her service with tears in their eyes. That evening, Rebecca returned to her quiet life, but Danny's Diner had learned what true courage looks like.